Welcome to episode number 43 of the CRM MVP podcast. I will be your host today. I don't have any guests this week, and the reason I think I decided not to have a guest this week is because I have another one of those, top 10s list that I was thinking about it. I think I was working with, one of our customers, and they were looking at implementing some functionality that I considered to be a user adoption magnet. And what I mean by user adoption magnet is that there are certain things in Dynamics that if you do very well, they'll keep users coming back. And when we were talking about implementing that functionality in place, which in this case will be number 2 of our list, I started thinking about, well, there are a few other things out there that would qualify as user adoption magnets. So I decided to write a list down. Obviously, I wrote 5 or 6 super quick, and then I figure, let's go ahead and get a top 10 list going. I'm not really sure how long this episode is going to be. I'm going to try to, take about an hour or less, 45 minutes or so. I don't think this is going to be the longest episode that we've ever had, especially after the one 2 weeks ago. It was an hour and 20 minutes long with Jonas and Nick and Jerry and Steve and myself talking about predictions and what is coming within the next 3 years. Hopefully you got to listen to that because, we made some of the predictions were pretty outrageous, and some of them are actually things that we expect to happen. We just, hope that they happen pretty soon. So let's talk about user adoption magnets, and I wonder if you have any other ones. Again, this is a list of 10 that I put together really quick. It took me about 2 minutes to write down 10 things that I consider, again, if you do very, very well, they'll keep the users coming. And I think that, when it comes to Dynamics 365, the real measure of the success of a solution is whether your users want to use it or not. But we'll dig a little bit deeper into that within the episode before we start on the list. So without any further ado, episode number 43 starts now. So before we get started with the list, I just wanted to talk about, the concept of user adoption magnets. And again, to me, in my opinion, user adoption magnets are, those things that if you do very well in Dynamics 365, they'll just make your solution effective. And I've said this multiple times. I really think that when it comes to being a solution architect, my job or our jobs as solution architects is to implement an effective solution. And there's really 2 solutions that we can implement when it comes to Dynamics and pretty much any other technology out there, which is an ineffective or an effective solution. My job is to make it effective. Now, this concept can be variable. And again, I might get a little controversial in this one, because for a lot of partners and a lot of organizations out there, especially if they self-deploy, success when it comes to implementing Dynamics 365 for a lot of people means whether you were able to put together a bunch of documentations, which sometimes they actually put together with a separate company that might not even have any idea about Dynamics 365. So I've seen that before. But they put together all this documentation, functional design documents, all this stuff. And success for partners or other companies, as I mentioned out there, is whether you hit every single one of the things that were specified on the design document. So if we have, 200 checkboxes, counting custom entities and fields and charts and workflows and integrations, and just think about all of the objects that you add on an implementation, 200, 300, 500, whatever, right? To customize the solution, and someone else determined that was the right way to do it, and now we're getting paid to get it done. For us as an organization, we consider it a success, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'm talking about other partners and other companies who do it this way. For companies like that, they consider it a success if they were able to do everything that was on the list within, especially if it's within the time frame and the budget that was agreed upon. That's a success. To me, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a success. It's a great thing. I would give you that. It's a positive thing that we're able to finish on time, on budget, and deploy the functionality that was expected by the customer. I like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Except that if the functionality that was requested was put together in a way that satisfied technical requirements, or perhaps the business requirements that were discussed by and decided upon by people who are not familiar with Dynamics 365 and the advantages of using Dynamics 365 and other Microsoft Business Solutions in the Power Platform and everything we have available, I feel that you can still fall short. I feel that you can implement a solution that, again, checks every box and deploys on time and on budget and still fail. Because to me, the real measure of success for a solution, I've said this multiple times, is whether your users adopt it or not. And users are going to always, 100% of the time, adopt a solution that helps them get better at their job. If you're a salesperson and you deploy a solution that helps me sell more so I can make more money in commissions, I'm going to adopt that solution. It's just common sense. No one wants to use a solution that makes their job more difficult and that takes more time away, that they could be spending making money right now. I'm talking about salespeople in particular. No one is going to do that. But if you can show a solution that is actually going to help them get better at acquiring customers, meaning selling, and maybe helping the organization get better at delivering the services or products that those customers bought from you, your solution will be adopted. I mean, it's just common sense. Again, it's a no-brainer. You implement a solution that will make people more money, or that will make it more effective at closing cases, or they will make it more effective at completing work orders because now they have a solution that will tell them what's the next appointment, where to go, how to perform the repair when they get there if they're unfamiliar with it, bring the right parts and tools, and I'm talking about field service in this case, or it could be project service, it could be portals. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as it makes you do your job better and more efficient, it's going to be adopted. It's going to be an effective solution. So there are several things in Dynamics 365, and I think I'm going to expand this beyond Dynamics 365. I'm going to talk about business applications or business solutions within Microsoft. I think the current term is business applications, so I'm going to go with that. There are several things that if we do right, they can make or break your solution. I mean, straight up, this is one of those things that, again, if you get right, the users will keep coming. So, once again, this is the top 10 Gus Gonzalez user adoption magnets list. So let's start with number 1. Number 1 is custom apps. Custom apps are awesome. And I'm always sort of bummed out when I hear that people are not taking advantage of it. For those of you who are unfamiliar, maybe listening to this, if you're not familiar with custom apps, we now can create custom applications within Dynamics 365 by leveraging the app designer and the sitemap editor. Now, sometimes I get the argument that we've always had the sitemap editor. Whether we're using the sitemap editor within the XRM toolbox or using another tool, or maybe you're a wizard, know a bunch of XML and can do it easily. We've always had the opportunity to edit the sitemap editor. We've also had the opportunity in the past, forever, right, to modify the areas that users have access to with security roles. That has been around for a long time, and it's always a best practice to hide sections and entities and functionality that users don't really need access to. And the security roles go beyond entities and access to entities, because we can filter, dashboards based on security roles. We can filter forms within entities with security roles. So we can add a little bit of, not security, but filtering on top of just the entity. So we can get a little bit more specific when it comes to that. The reason why I like apps is because it goes beyond that. With apps, we can not only pick the sitemap that they're going to see, we can also pick the views that they'll have access to, something that today we can enforce with security roles, and is one of the things I wish we had. But even if we do have it, it's available now with the app designer. We can pick which views it will be available to them. We can pick, which entities for sure will be available to them. We can pick the business process flows, which we can now filter with security roles. You can do that today, but we can pick it within the application designer or the app designer. We can create a fully customized experience for the user with its own URL, its own security role access to it. And it's awesome. I mean, I don't understand why more people don't use it. Now I do realize that it comes with its own headaches when it comes to administration, because if you create, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw a number, 17 custom apps out there, and then you add in a new custom entity that it's going to be, it's going to be requiring 8 of the 17, or 12 of the 17. It's a pain, right? You're going to have to go and edit each one of them, and it's going to be a pain to get it done. But I mean, I just don't see a whole lot of downsides to it other than the eventual modification of it. Other than that, it provides a bunch of benefits. So I think when you create and deploy custom apps and they're done right, people love it. And again, this can be a little controversial from my perspective. The way I've been using custom apps might be a little unorthodox, I guess, a little bit different. And the reason why I say that is because I tend to leave security wide open, which for a lot of organizations, they sort of get scared about this. And certainly the customers that I work with and the companies that I'm implementing Dynamics for don't really grasp the idea of leaving security wide open. By wide open, I mean read at the organization level. And the reason for this, and we've talked about this on episode 19 when we talked about security, I talked at length about how security can affect your performance and how the system is designed in a way that if it reads that you have organization read level, then it skips all security checks. It shows you all the records that match that particular filter. So when you go to a view, there's two things being considered. One is, based on security, what records do you have access to? What's your pool of data that you're pulling from? So if you're on a very secure organization, maybe the security role that you have has only access to the business unit level to read. So, based on the accounts owned by other users and teams within your business unit, now let me apply the filter on top of it. So let's say you're looking at large opportunities. You created a view for large opportunities. Any opportunity with an estimated revenue larger than $100,000. So that's a filter that you're applying. So first, Dynamics needs to figure out which of all of the opportunities in the system are available for you to see. So if you have a strong security in place, let's say you're using a bunch of security roles, you're a member of a bunch of teams, and you have business units, and you're really, really strong about what you have access to, Dynamics has to work that out. It needs to figure out what's your data pool essentially to pull from, and then it will layer the filter on top of it. In this case will be opportunities that are larger than $100,000. Now, the way I've been doing it is, most organizations get a system like Dynamics 365 because they are lacking clarity. They don't know what's going on. They can't see what other teams are working on. So in a lot of cases, when you work with companies and they'll say, well, I want my East Coast division not to be able to see the West Coast or something like that, what it really boils down to is, it's either for convenience reasons. I don't want them to see it because there's no point on people from the West Coast, looking at leads and accounts from the East Coast, or it's for, they are afraid that there are going to be changes or deletions or assignments or something like that. So it typically boils down to those two things. Number one, for convenience. Number two, I'm afraid they're going to mess it up. And if that's the case, just giving people organization read does none of those two things, right? Because you can still filter out the records that are not applicable to your territory. I can create a view that says accounts on the East Coast, and based on the states or whatever criteria I decide to use for the view, I can, I only show records on the East Coast, and then the same thing for the West Coast, right? So I can do that with filters. I can isolate it and remove, quote unquote, those accounts you don't need to see. I can do that with filters. I don't need security to do that, to accomplish that. And on the other hand, if we're concerned about making changes, well, organization read doesn't make you be able to do changes at all, right? I can still give you user level right. I can still give you, business unit level right, and give you organization read. I promise you, giving everyone organization read and just layering a filter on top of it, like using views, for example, it's going to improve your performance tremendously. And that's something I get to do with custom apps. So I'll create views that filter out, different teams unneeded records or undesirable records. Let's just put it that way. And then I make those the default views on the apps they access. So when the West Coast logs in into the West Coast app, they only will see by default records that are on the West Coast. Now, yes, they could use advanced find and search for that other information, so it's not really secure. But remember, most organizations don't care about that. They got a system because they have no idea what's going on. That's the whole point of it. So in a lot of my implementations, again, I go with custom apps because it improves performance. Simply put, and again, the security requirements about we don't want them to see this, we don't want them to see that. And in a lot of cases, it boils down to it's a convenience thing, or it's we just don't want them to edit it, but they can see it all day long. Just don't let them change it. That's fine. I can deal with that on security. So custom apps, number one, on my list of user adoption magnets. And again, this list is not a top to bottoms. It's not the number one is the best or the worst. This is just 10 things that I consider are user adoption magnets. Each one of these, I could spend a whole episode talking about the way I configure it. So I just talked for about 10 minutes about how I set up custom apps. And there's a lot more, obviously, to learn from that. And how do you set it up so it's your default app when you log in through crm.dynamics.com, or you go to the portal.office.com and you log in. How can you land on your custom app by default? Because yes, if you know your URL, you can go straight to it. But what if you don't remember the URL, right? So there's a lot to learn about custom apps. And again, we could do a whole episode about it, but I'll just leave it at, if you get it done right, custom apps will keep your users coming. Number 2 on the list is goals. Is the functionality I was talking about earlier today that one of my customers is thinking about. They're thinking about tracking goals year after year, and we had a discussion about it. A lot of people don't use or like or recommend using goals. I'm not really sure why. It sure has its pitfalls, right? It has its cons. I don't like the fact that it's not in real time. I don't like the fact that it calculates once a day. I also don't like the fact that roll-up fields calculate once a day, but that's the way it works, right? That's the way we can do it based on the technical capabilities of the system that we have today. So goals has been around for a long time. It hasn't changed. It's one of those things that when you go and log into it, it looks like the forms are from CRM4 or something like that. It's been around for forever. They haven't changed it, and there's not a whole lot of reason to change it. It's one of those things that I agree. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. The out of the box BI solutions available for goals are great. We have some charts that are really, really useful. My favorite one is the one that shows progress over the target. So it shows you not only the target that you have, but it shows you your progress. It shows you also, there's a little triangle. If you look at it, there's a little triangle that shows you where you're supposed to be if you want to hit your target. Man, that thing keeps people coming like nobody's business, especially when the goal or the target that you have set is for data they don't normally have access to. Like, for example, when they close a deal for an agreement that goes for months and months and months, they don't keep opening opportunities for those. But their sales goals, which are tracked in ERP, in invoices and orders, they don't have access to that information. So if we can synchronize that information to Dynamics, even if it's read-only, but then create goals based on that, just the fact that they can log in every morning or every week, go to this dashboard and be able to track their progress against their targets that are specified on the goals. Now, I realize there's a whole lot of challenges about goals, and again, it's another one of those that we can do an episode about, because dealing with roll-up queries and dealing with ownership and the fact that if you want to keep track of progress on the goals over time and be able to compare quarter by quarter, month by month, and all of that, you have to be creating a ton of goals. So if you have 200 salespeople and you have goals that are monthly and you want to keep them forever, it takes a lot of administration. So I'm not saying it's a perfect functionality or it's one of those things that are easy to set up and maintain going forward. But for the user perspective, the users are not doing all this management stuff. For the users, it's a huge magnet. There's people who love goals, that love keeping the information accurate because they don't want to show that they are, $1 million above their target and then realize that all of that was data that was wrong, because they'll get scolded by that. Or at the same time, not put any information and show they're doing really bad. So typically data quality, user adoption, all of that stuff goes up if you get goals configured correctly. So once again, and I know some of you listening to this, MVPs or non-MVPs are, grunting right now and getting upset about goals because they're not big fans, but I wouldn't even say I'm a big fan either. I'm just saying that functionality works great in Dynamics 365 for what it's designed to do. And when you do it right and you set it up in a way that people can have access to information they didn't have access to before, it works great. I mean, I've had implementations where I've asked them straight up, if I can give you this information, if I can show you your progress on the quarter or the year, where you are at a given point, and tell you where you should be if you want to hit your target, how would that work for you? And the answer has been all the way to, if you do that, I'll be on the system. It will be the best thing ever. Like, I never know where I am on a target, or I have to ask the people on the ERP system or whatever it is, and I never know how I'm doing. I have an idea, but I never know exactly, especially the where I should be part. That's another one. So goals is number 2 on the list. Moving on to number 3. This one is it's interesting because it varies from business to business, and I don't think it works for every implementation or every company out there, but it's certainly a great functionality is scoring. So scoring leads or scoring accounts or scoring projects or whatever it is. Anytime we can give people some sort of prioritization, right? Some sort of, here's a list of all the leads that you have access to. However, look, I sorted them by the likeliness of this becoming an opportunity or a customer. So if you have 1,000 leads that are assigned to you because you just came back from a conference or something like that, let me put on top the ones that score higher. So you start calling those right now, and the ones that score lower, like there's, highly unlikely we're going to do business with these guys, put them at the bottom, right? So anytime I can sort of handhold or guide salespeople or customer service representatives or anyone into which records to work on first. And again, as I mentioned, customer service representative, this is not exclusive to sales. This is also something that you can do on the customer service side and show them which cases are more important, which we can use. Maybe it's not a score, but we can use things like priority levels and, what kinds of products it is or what kind of customer they are. I mean, you can think of multiple combinations in which you say, okay, anyone who is a high priority and is a platinum customer will be at the top. You can come up with your own system, but anytime we can help users sort of know what's the next best action, who's the next person I should call, what's the most important, the most pressing issue right now, anything we can do in terms of that, it's a huge user adoption magnet. It's something that perhaps they can do on their own if they have little responsibilities. If they're only managing 5 accounts, right? Like sometimes I work with companies that their customers are government entities, right? And they just service like the CDC. That's it. That's my only customer. Obviously, in those cases, maybe scoring doesn't work as well or is not as applicable. But for a lot of cases, in a lot of cases for a lot of companies, having a list or some kind of prioritization in place for me to help me be more effective at my job it's huge. It's awesome. So it's one of those user adoption magnets. Again, lead scoring, account scoring. I don't think you have to figure this out on your own. There are some solutions out there like Versium, for example, that can help you do that. I think there's some intelligence coming from what used to be known as customer insights that can help you do this. Maybe the information that comes from relationship insights, in which relationships that are going down or downhill, I would say, can make it higher on your priority. There are many ways to look at it. I don't think there is a clear formula for every organization out there. I don't think I can say every company you should do this. I think every company is different, but what every company has in common is how much more effective you can be at your job if you have a list that is prioritized, so you can focus on the things that will make you more successful or keep customers happier. So lead or account scoring is number 3. All right, moving on to number 4, automation. Super simple, right? The more I can take off your plate, the more I can get with the system, or the more I can get the system to do for you, the more time you have to do your job or rest or do whatever you want, right? So if you're spending 2 hours a week putting together some sales report, is there any way that Dynamics can do that for you? And I'm not saying everything has to be workflows. I think when people think of automation, they think of workflows or plugins or something that some automatic process in place. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's just data entry. Sometimes it's just visuals like BI and stuff like that. You used to spend, whatever amount of hours entering this information to produce some kind of sales report. You don't have to do that, right? We can fix that. Now, obviously, workflows and Microsoft Flow and plugins and actions and all those things play a huge role in this as well. The fact that, every time you resolve a case, you have to compose this email to tell the customer the case has been resolved, and we can now automatically send that email out for you. Those things add up. I mean, they add up when it comes to time that you spend on your solution. And again, the more we can have Dynamics do for the user, the more time they have to do something else. So just going back to the example of the 2 hours a week putting together a sales report, if I can put together a sales report automatically and email it to your manager or whatever it is, now I'm giving you back 2 hours a week, which translates into 8 hours a month, which is a whole day. Right? A whole day that you can spend selling. And maybe you're not going to close an opportunity every month with that extra day that you have. Maybe you'll close 2 opportunities in the year, right? Now that you're having 12 more days, so over 2 more weeks to sell. Maybe on those 2 weeks, you manage to close 1 opportunity, just one of them. And you get to make $500. Whatever, right? In commission. I'm just thinking about the worst case scenarios are still way better than having people do it manually. And even if you get no results, the fact that the system can do it for you and you can focus on doing something else that the system cannot do for you, it's a huge user adoption magnet. It's one of those things that, again, it makes the solution much more effective. If I have to think about all of the things I like working on when it comes to Dynamics 365, thinking about the architecture piece of it, the technical side of it, the security, data, work, customization, and configure. If I have to think about everything, and including training, if I have to think about everything that comprises project and my responsibilities and the tasks that I do on a project, I would say automation is my favorite. I think automating processes and being able to take someone's job or some function of their job out into having a system do it every time, it's awesome. I was meeting today with a prospect, and we were talking about their lead qualification process. They have a staff of several dozen people. All they do is lead qualify. And when we were talking about the process, I said, okay, so what do the lead qualification people do? And they essentially said, well, when leads are entering into the system, they call, they make sure that the contact information is accurate, and then they, based on territory or based on the product they're interested or whatever it is, they go ahead and assign it to the right sales rep. So immediately I'm like, well, is this something the system can do? Like, for example, and there were some questions about budgets and stuff like that. And I'm like, if we have a lot of leads that are coming through our website, instead of just asking people for their, first name, last name, and email address and hit contact us button, can we ask some of these questions? So they're automatic. So we don't need to call them to find this information out, number one. And number two, based on those answers, can we automate the assignment process? So as it comes in, based on territory, product, whatever it is, the condition, we're going to ahead and assign it. Go ahead and assign it to the right salesperson. Can we do this automatically? And that way, the staff, you have 20 people just doing lead qualification, they can do something else. And maybe you don't need to get rid of everybody, right? All your lead qualification staff, but maybe you have 1 or 2 people now doing those tough ones that will come in and, you do have to call or whatever. But can we significantly increase the performance by automating pieces of it? This is not just about sales. This is about trying to find areas or gaps within the process that we can automate. Some of the automation is for processes that don't even exist. That's another thing that you have to think about, is something they're not doing today. How can we automate that portion? They're not doing it today because manually it would take too long. So for example, I'll just give you a quick and easy example. Somebody signs up for a yearly commitment, right? And they have to renew every year. Instead of having them keep track of it manually on a list, how about we have a workflow that, waits 9 months and then starts sending notifications to the salesperson to, let them know that, hey, you should start reaching out, or maybe reach out to the customer directly and say, hey, you bought this thing 9 months ago, you're ready to renew, right? They're not doing this today. Now we can do it automatically with the system, looking for opportunities in which the system can help the company make more money, retain their customers, get better at delivering services, whatever it is. Automation can be also about integration. Every time we create a record, a lead in Dynamics, once we qualify it, we have to reach out to the ERP team so they create an account in SAP or Finance and Operations. So then the integration will have, well, is there any way we can automate that process? And now that we have Microsoft Flow, we can go beyond what we need to do in Dynamics. Sometimes it's about creating a folder in SharePoint or uploading a document or whatever it is. Like, it goes beyond Dynamics. We can automate some of that with Flow. And maybe we should have a whole show about Flow as well, now that I think about it. But again, the whole point is the user adoption magnet in this case is automation. If you don't use the system, automation doesn't do anything. You have to use it to have it working, but the benefits of it are so great that it makes you use the system. So that is number 4 on the list. Moving on with number 5, this one is an underutilized feature, to be honest with you, but I would say out of the list, is pretty weak. But when you train users and you get it right, it definitely cuts down the time that it takes for people to navigate around, and that is the most recently utilized or the most recently used records in the system, the list of most recently used records. Now, obviously, the list is there. When you go into accounts and you drop it down, you see the last accounts that you opened. When you go to contacts, the same thing. That's not what I'm talking about. Yes, that's great. Some people figure that out. But teaching people how to pin records, how to, really use all the capabilities of MRUs is one of those things that are user adoption magnets. People love that. The fact that they can always go back and quickly find the records that they need is one of those things that will keep people coming back to Dynamics as well. Again, if I compare it with automation, obviously it's not as strong as a user adoption magnet, but I've seen it where users are, struggling to figure out, like, okay, I was working in this case earlier today. Now I can't figure out how to get there again because somebody else took ownership or something, and all I know how to do is my cases or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Just go to the recently used records and it will be there, right? So teaching people how to do that will cut the frustration down. If you get an average of 10 people yelling a week saying they are done with Dynamics, maybe that will go down to 3 next week or eliminate it completely. But the whole point is, something as simple as MRUs can really help you get people in the system and keeping them in the system. All right, number 6. Number 6 is integrations. Integrations to data they can't see otherwise. And I sort of touched upon this when we talked about goals and being able to create goals with data from the ERP system or some data they don't normally see. But integrations to functionality or data they typically don't have access to is typically a huge user adoption magnet as well. I'll give you an example of an external integration that got people in the system. So I did an implementation once for, I think I've done actually 2 or 3 of those for a transportation company. This transportation company, think of like, I don't want to say UPS because that's not how it is, but these are, just heavy loads moving, hauling all over the U.S., Canada, Mexico. They're a big organization. And, one of the things that they struggle with is to pull information about the trucks, their fleet. So understanding which trucks were due for an inspection, which trucks, because they were all over, again, 3 different countries. So being able to pull that, they had to go into DMV records. They had to pull information from, several other websites that were government related and third party related. And what we did is we created an integration with APIs that were able to access those systems and in one single entity called vehicles in Dynamics 365, you were able to pull reports from 4 different external services. They gave you all the information about the truck. Are there any fines out there? Are there anything that was outstanding that was needed for them, that took them hours going through different systems and jumping from one to another? Now we were all summarized. We were all summarizing all of that information into one single entity that they were able to massage and work with and print and do whatever they want and reassign to different people. That is eventually escalated into trucks that they put up for sale, trucks that they just sent to the junker because they were too old. It kept records of repairs and maintenance over time, drivers. Like, the system just kept growing and growing and growing. But the integrations was that one thing that we use as a magnet. So I don't think necessarily we're thinking about data they couldn't see otherwise, but the fact that we were able to bring multiple data sources into one single version of the truth was a huge success for that project. Got the people using the system. It was the magnet that attracted them into the system. And once they were in the system, it grew to a lot more than just to be able to pull sort of the vehicle's 360 view. Let me see everything about the vehicle. It grew to something much bigger just because they were already in the system using it due to the integration. Integrations go beyond data integrations. Of course, integrations to other technology can be a huge magnet, right? Having the fact that you were maybe on a CRM system where you had to copy and paste emails from one system to another, or something like that. Maybe having an integration with Office, now it's huge for you. Maybe an integration with OneNote, it's huge for you. It doesn't have to be data per se and showing this information from other sources, but if you can have it in a way that it attracts people to use it because it's a lot easier, it makes a lot more sense in the context they're looking at it within Dynamics 365, then I'm all for it. Integration can be a huge user adoption magnet, so keep that in mind. All right, moving on. Number 7 on the list. This one is big, but it only applies to online, but it is relationship insights. And I touched upon this a little bit before when we were talking about lead and account scoring, about what criteria you can use to determine which accounts were the highest priority. Relationship Insights is awesome. If you haven't looked at it, I strongly recommend you to dive into it. But essentially is, in my opinion, the first real collaboration I saw between 2 separate teams within Microsoft. And I've never worked for Microsoft. I don't know if this is true or not. This is just my pure observation, and the observation is highly, highly based in my ignorance of how Microsoft works because I've never worked there, right? So I don't know internally how this works. But I feel that all the integrations in the past, the integrations between Office and SharePoint and even Exchange up until, a couple of versions ago when Dynamics 365 was released in, I guess it's 2016 at this point, late 2016. But whenever Dynamics 365 was released, the relationship between the teams didn't feel like it was one unit, right? I feel that the Office team or the Exchange or SharePoint team sort of released enough information to make this stuff works. It wasn't like, let's all sit down in a room and figure out how we can better communicate and take advantage of the fact that we, Microsoft, creates these products. I never felt that way. It never felt that way. It always felt like, yeah, we can now connect to Exchange, server-side sync. Now the 2 servers talk to each other. We don't depend on a MAPI client like Email Router or the Outlook client for this thing to work. That's awesome. Yes, that's the way it should have worked the whole time. But I feel that was just a sort of like, wrestle with Exchange, and somehow they figure out a way to communicate with it. It didn't feel to me, and I might be 150% wrong about this, but I'm sure other people listening to this will agree with me. It didn't feel to me that it was a cross-team collaboration. Let's get together and make the best out of it. I've never felt like this until Relationship Insights was released. When Relationship Insights was introduced in Dynamics 365, and I saw that, well, first of all, I saw that editable grids got a standing ovation more than Relationship Insights because we didn't even know what this was until we saw it in action. Relationship Insights was the first time that I felt two teams within Microsoft really work together. Let's sit down together. You guys are experts in Exchange. We're experts in Dynamics and business, quote unquote. Let's get together and figure out how we can take advantage of this relationship we have. Let's make one team relationship insights or team money, whatever. I don't know what they call the team, but the point is that's the first time I felt that they work together on something, because relationship insights, it's unbelievable. I mean, if you haven't checked it out. If I have to summarize it, and that's another one of those where we can do a whole episode about, super passionate about that one. If I have to summarize it, I would say is as if Dynamics 365 and Exchange were brothers or best friends, and Exchange was passing information to Dynamics that would make Dynamics better at its job, meaning the job of dealing with customer engagement, right? So we realize that when it comes to customer engagement, a big part of that is activities and communication. And in order for us to communicate with customers, for the most part, and a lot of businesses do a lot of phone calls and other ways to communicate, but for the most part, we're emailing a lot. Every time a proposal comes in, yes, there are companies out there that might deliver a proposal by paper or whatever in person, but for the most part, we send it out in an email, right? Every time I'm going to do an implementation, I write an SOW for one of our customers or a prospect in that case, I send it out via email. So this is a way for Exchange to be able to report back to Dynamics and report information that is highly useful to allow Dynamics, or in this case CRM or customer engagement, to do its job better, to be a better customer engagement platform. For example, you get information about how often or how quickly they read your emails, right? How much time they spend on it, whether they're clicking on the links or not. Now, some of this functionality is old if you come from the marketing automation side and what marketers have access to. Email analytics are called. These are typical for marketing solutions, but they were never really available for all users or for sales users, if I dare to say. This wasn't out there. But imagine how valuable it is that I can send out a proposal and I know if you opened it or not, whether you reach out back to me or not. But Exchange knows. Exchange knows if you opened the email and you read it and you perhaps clicked on the links inside of it. If I'm tracking that functionality as well, if you open the attachment, there's a lot of things that Exchange can pass in terms of information that Dynamics can use, or the users within Dynamics can use to be better at their jobs. I know that I know that it might be illegal in some countries or continents. Looking at you, Europe. But at least here in the U.S., where we apparently have the Wild Wild West of tracking, we can do it, right? And it's awesome, right? It's awesome to be able to get information from Exchange and leverage that in order to make us better. Anything that can give us the edge, on top of our competitors, I'll take it, right? We need to differentiate ourselves from competitors, and again, any information that I can have, especially because we're already collecting it on another solution that is also created by Microsoft, then I'm all in for it. So Relationship Insights is one of those things that is amazing. You guys need to check it out if you haven't done so already. If you have a solution that is older, or maybe if you're on premise and you've never even heard of this thing, just Google it, Bing it, whatever, YouTube it. Relationship Insights is amazing and is number 7 in our list. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is I'm going to make a combo on this one. I'm going to say LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Sales Insights. I'm going to put them all together. And the reason why I'm going to put them together is because the product themselves, the solutions themselves are not the user magnet. The results that can come from them are the magnets. I'll give you an example. The fact that with the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, the fact that I can find out if someone within my team is connected to a person I want to reach out to could make or break a deal, right? If you reach out to somebody out of the blue, you're essentially risking it, right? It's a lottery. Will they answer to me? Will they talk to me? You don't know that. However, if I reach out to you because someone else within my company knows you and recommended you or made an introduction, how we can request introductions in the Sales Navigator, that's a huge advantage and a huge magnet for me as a salesperson and as an organization to be able to have that functionality. Sales Insights might not offer that kind of functionality, but it does offer some insights that are important. And I'm talking about Sales Insights, which is the inside view collaboration that Microsoft is doing that comes built in Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement Online by default. So one of the things that I like about Sales Insights is the ability to synchronize data that is out of whack, right? I log in and it tells me, hey, you logged in into this account. I said that in the system in Dynamics, this account has 4 contacts. However, I found 12. Do you want me to synchronize the other 6 or the other 8 if I can do math? Sorry, guys, about that. But once again, Sales Insights will say, do you want me to synchronize the other contacts in here? And you say, yes, please. And boom, all of those contacts will be in the system now. Or it will look at the fields within the account view and say, actually, that address doesn't match the one I found. This is the one I found. Do you want to sync it? You say, yes, please. And that synchronization comes through. So the data quality alone, when a solution like Sales Insights is leveraged, it's a huge magnet as well. Another one that I really like for companies that have long-term opportunities and engagements, the fact that through Sales Insights, if the decision maker, or this is also with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, if the decision maker on your opportunity, your large long-term opportunity, left the company. If now there's a new CEO or VP of whatever, or CIO, whoever you were dealing with, now it's been replaced or you left to go to another company, that's a huge piece of information I need to know. If on my 12 to 18 month opportunity, 6 months into it, the guy who was supposed to be the decision maker left, that's a critical piece of information I want to know as a salesperson. So the fact that we have solutions like the LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Sales Insights are great for salespeople, especially super effective when it comes to selling. So because of that, it is number 8 in our list. All right, moving on to number 9. Number 9 is mobility. And within mobility, I'm not just going to limit it to Mocha or the mobile application or tablet application. I think Microsoft people listening to this, every time I say Mocha, they sort of cringe. But I can't get it out of my mind. I think it's such a cool name. You should bring it back. Mocha for life. # Mocha for life. All right, anyway. So mobility to me is number 9, and that's because I'm going to expand it beyond the phone and tablet applications to include Power Apps as well, to include Power BI mobile as well, to include essentially any solution that provides access to functionality that before you had to be at a desktop to be able to access it, right? Obviously, we could do more than one episode about Power Apps or about mobility on its own. I think we should have a mobility episode, although we did have a mobility conversation with Ivan from Resco a few episodes ago. I think it's episode 23, so you can go back and check it out. I might be wrong about that. But again, I think that mobility is one of those things that if you get right, it will be a huge user adoption magnet. Your users will love it. They'll be on it all the time. Leverage Power Apps, whether they are Canvas apps that you create from scratch or whether you create a model-driven app by using the platform itself to design your app, which I love. No matter how you do it, I think that you should definitely consider providing your users with functionality on the mobile app. And we talked about the approach when it comes to mobility. When it comes to mobility, you don't want mobility to be an afterthought. Right? We talked about mistakes that the organizations make implementing Dynamics in the past in multiple episodes, and one of those is mobility. People sort of leave it as an afterthought, like, okay, we configure everything cool. How about the mobile? Oh yeah, we'll make sure that it's also visible in the mobile. They don't take advantage of the fact that mobile devices are amazing. They're everywhere. You carry it on your pocket everywhere. They do things that are great. They take pictures. They can capture signatures with the touchscreen. They can do pretty amazing stuff. That form factor is heavily underutilized in Dynamics 365 implementations, and I think that if you do it right, it will be a user adoption magnet for you, and that's why it's number 9 on our list. Okay, number 10. I'm going to wrap up the episode with one that is not technical, is not about features, but is more about attitude. One of the tricks that I've been using for a long time when it comes to training users and training organizations to adopt Dynamics 365 is that I create this thing called a user assurance circle or cycle, if you want to call it. In this user adoption cycle, I essentially target the managers and the people who are benefiting from the users pushing information, keeping everything and tracking everything in the system. And I talk to the users separately. I have 2 messages for them. To the users, and I tell them this in front of their managers. I always say, going forward, every time one of your managers asks you, where are we on this particular deal, or where are we in this case, or what are we waiting for, or whatever it is, your answer is simply going to be, it's in CRM. That's it, going forward. I typically get a couple laughs and a couple people saying like, there's no way, if my manager asks me, I'm going to tell him where we are, right? But I strongly push for this, the adoption of this philosophy or attitude of user assurance. So users, you tell managers it's in CRM for everything. Managers, and I tell them this in front of the users, going forward, you're going to say that if it's not in CRM, it doesn't exist. As simple as that. So if somebody says, hey, where's my, I didn't hit my target, but that's because I haven't put in this on the system, or, I know that opportunity is still in the forecast or the pipeline, but actually I talked to them, they're not going to move forward. If it's not in the system, it doesn't exist, period, right? That's what managers push for. And again, I tell my users, if your manager comes asking, you say it's in CRM. So what that does is, in this cycle or in this circle of user adoption, what that does is that it pushes users to keep information in Dynamics up to date, because that way their managers can just go to Dynamics and not micromanage them and ask them where they are with every single deal or case or whatever they're working with. And then for the managers, it makes sure that they can have the latest and greatest information, because people will be pushing it there, or else it doesn't exist. So this attitude throughout the organization is something that will keep people, if adopted and done correctly, it will keep people in the organization coming back, logging in, using the system. Now, again, there's more information behind this. I talked to Clarissa about change management on episode 10, one of our most popular episodes, on how do you get user adoption. So it goes beyond that, but I think the secret or the main component on this is creating this culture of user assurance, right? Where we're all pushing information to Dynamics and you're not asking us about it because it's in Dynamics. I'm putting it in, so don't ask me about it. Then from the other side, I'm looking in the system, so don't come complaining and whining about the fact that it's not there. So that is number 10 on the list of user adoption magnets. So once again, you might agree or disagree with some of them on the list. There's certainly a lot more things that we could add to this user adoption magnet. I think that it gave me a few ideas on future episodes, but it's always good to hear from you and tell me what you want me to talk about in the future and whether I should have a guest or not. Once again, sometimes I just have time to just hit record and jump on the recording. Obviously, I'm not using a script, as you can tell. So I just hit record, and then I start talking about a specific topic that I was just thinking about, or something happened to me, and I just thought about jumping in here and sharing sort of my thoughts and opinions and experience with you guys, and obviously be able to hear what you think about it. So if you have any suggestion for future episodes or for future guests, please drop us a line at info@CRMMVP Podcast. You can always follow us on Twitter and tweet at us and retweet the stuff that we put out there at CRMMVP Podcast. And all of our episodes are at crmmvppodcast.com. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. I'm pumped about it. See you then.